Welcome to our channel, Seasoned Insights. And for our viewers, we have with us Dr. Manisha Shridhar, who is with the World Health Organization, as you can see from the banner. And we'll be talking to her both as our author for Thomson Reuters, as well as a person, and what she can give us in terms of her journey in life, advice, all of it for your benefit. So welcome again, ma'am. And if you're ready, then we can start.
Yeah, thank you, Gauri. And I'm very grateful to you for having asked me to speak. It's a privilege. Thanks.
Thank you. So, as a starting point, let's talk about you. So, tell us something about yourself.
Presently, I'm working as a regional advisor in the Southeast Asia regional office of WHO-SEARO, which is based out of New
Mhm,
Delhi. And we have 11 countries in our region,
mhm,
the regional office, where I'm closely engaged in the area of intellectual property rights and trade,
mhm.
which looks at for access to medicines. As you can see from my book, the non-communicable diseases, the work on
Yes.
alcohol, and so it's a very wide spectrum,
Mhm,
including digital health, traditional medicine, which is currently an area of importance with the present government in India.
mhm,
So, I'm called upon to work on intellectual property rights and trade issues for all the countries in the region.
mhm.
And apart from that, within WHO, I am perhaps the only person who has who happen to get into this area of intellectual property rights and trade. So
Yeah.
very often, even in the headquarter, which is based out of Geneva,
Mhm,
I get documents which are sent to me for comments or otherwise. So it's a very fascinating field of work because of the expanse that it covers, and yet the specificity what it covers. Because I have to talk about what intellectual property rights.
property.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I do understand the amount of research that goes into the book, and when people see the book, when we bring it out, many people don't understand the amount of work which has gone into it. Not many people understand what it takes, even to write a book of a very small book. And in your case, a topic which is so vast, the amount of time that you've taken, the research that has gone into it, it's actually quite amazing. And to be very frank, when I was there during the launch and Dr. Vinod Paul spoke about it, that is when I really understood the depth of the work that has gone into it. I was actually fascinated. I sat there and listened. It's normally very difficult to listen to speeches, but this was very, very interesting. And I came back and told people, as to I fully understood as to how much of work has gone into it. So I should thank you for that. And so, have you always been in this field? I know you are from the IAS cadre, so you started here, or was it a little different, and then you came into this WHO field later? How did it happen?
It's a bit of a story, Gauri. If I had been told about 15 years ago that this is what I would be doing, I would not have believed it, because I was a career civil servant, and
Yeah.
I was happy to be doing well. And I had no intention of branching out into something like this, but things happen. So just to, I'll be brief, but when I was posted as district magistrate in Kangra in Dharamsala,
Mhm.
that's where the Dalai Lama lives.
Yes, yes, yes. I've been there. Yeah.
It's a beautiful place. So
Very
we,
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, so at that time, this was very way back in 94, 95, when we had a program which said that can we increase the productivity of people in the villages. And
Hmm.
so at that time, I started looking at wheat and rice patterns in Kangra and in Himachal. And I realized that we'll never reach the levels of Punjab and Haryana because the farmers' land holdings are very small.
Small. Mm.
So at that time, I worked a bit with the University of Palampur, and we conceived this floriculture program.
Hmm.
Where for the first time, I heard about patented bulbs which we were importing from Holland for the farmer.
Okay. Hmm.
And we started with that program. It had initial success. Then they were because farmers over subscribed and the demand supply dropped. So we learned a lot out of it, even though it is continuing because later on when the Commonwealth Games took place in Delhi, the flowers
Delhi.
came
Hmm.
to Kangra.
Oh, okay.
So that was the beginning when I heard about this. And then later, when I was posted as, we were called upon to work as faculty in the National
Hmm.
Academy of Administration in Missouri.
Hmm.
And there, then director said that, you start teaching WTO issues.
Hmm.
And I said that, what exactly do you want me to do? He says, I don't know. You're an IS officer. Start reading, start learning, and get on to the job. So
Yeah, figure it out.
figure it out. So
Yeah.
that started me on the journey. And when I looked at all, those were early days of WTO. So the
Mm.
agreements were still very fresh. The textile agreement, which has been sunsetted, was still alive. And so
Hmm.
when I looked at all the agreements, I found that, in India and all developing countries, we missed out on the industrial revolution.
Yes.
And but what happens is that if we are playing catch up phase in the software.
Yes.
So if you look at all the WTO agreements, intellectual property rights is the one agreement, the trade related aspects of intellectual property rights. With the other agreements, to a certain extent, I would say the technical barriers to trade and the sanitary and phytosanitary agreements.
Hmm.
Primarily the TRIPS agreement. If we can get it right, it can do for
Hmm.
us what we are doing in software.
Right. Mm.
And that actually started me on the journey. So that was the initial phase.
Okay. No, it's good to hear. And like you said, it's one of those niche fields that. So I'll now come to the. Let me ask you this in this way, and I'm just going back again to what was discussed during the launch. Um, you had a first book with us, which was on public health, and this book is titled as Universal Healthcare. What prompted you to write this book?
That's such a $1 million question
Okay.
because I was answering that at home as well. That
Yeah.
what is it that you want to put in? I think Gauri, my first book
Hmm.
gave the introduction as to why and how the international agreements got negotiated.
Hmm.
So I looked at right in the domains of intellectual property rights, the formation of the Paris Agreement, and
Hmm.
how industrial property was negotiated in that agreement. And
Right.
I also covered copyright agreement. It was Victor Hugo who
Hmm.
spearheaded the Berne Convention on Copyright because he said, you're doing all this for industrial property. What are you doing it for copyrights and authors? So
Correct. Mm.
and that is very important even when you look at this area, when you look at labeling of medicines, there is a copyright
Hmm.
and a mark aspect to it. And there
Right. Mm.
is issue. So in that book, and also the formation of WHO is what I brought about in that book. How was it negotiated from the League of Nations? There was a health
Yes.
there was a malaria committee. They metamorphosed into the WHO when the UN system was formed. And
Hmm.
the role of the Rockefeller Foundation to make it happen. So sometimes, it is important to know the context in which our international organizations, and as a result of them, our national programs get, created. So
Cricket.
that was the
Mm.
first book.
Okay.
Having said that, I realized that we need to look at specific issues with respect to these operation of these international agreements for universal healthcare.
Hmm.
And as I mentioned earlier, was that, in internationally, the word used is universal health coverage. And
Yes.
I really don't personally like the word coverage because I think it's an indemnity from a harm.
Yes.
It's not
Correct.
here. And these international and legal provisions are very important in driving universal healthcare, which is something that we don't, in when you're running a program, they're often getting lost.
Hmm.
And because of that, we are not, there is a lot more which can easily be done to make a program very successful if we just
Hmm.
get the context right.
Right.
So that is why, I chose the different chapters of the book, the access to medicines,
Mm-hmm.
role of R&D. People think that pharmaceutical companies set price because they want to recoup the cost of.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's one bit of understanding I took away from there. Even I felt the same thing. I thought it was based on that. It's only
Yeah,
then I realized it's not that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
then,
that was kind of surprising.
yeah, yeah. Then antimicrobial resistance. There's so much of work happening.
Hmm.
We expect because of our antibiotics, they are not responding in certain cases of, say, MDR, TB, and others. We want
Mm.
these new antibiotics to be created by the research, but
Hmm.
they are not going to be the first line of treatment because we don't want to use them at all.
Correct. Yeah.
So, what should be the approach? What is the what? How do we see the system?
Hmm.
Make it rational.
Okay.
And similarly, the chapter on non-communicable diseases, where actually I put in alcohol and tobacco along with nutrition, which looks a little odd combination, but because there is an underlying theme of all the agreements in that.
Fair enough. So now coming very specifically to the book itself. Um, so I know it's very difficult to quantify. You've explained actually. I'm going to take bits from the from your speech in the launch because you had spoken about it chapter wise. So I'll take it from there. But if I were to ask you, what are the top or salient points, right? Which would be interesting to somebody who's looking at buying the book or reading the book, whichever way you look at it. What would be the top five? Uh, I mean, top five, top whatever. I leave it to you. I know it's difficult to bring it down to five, but still.
No, I'm just thinking, the one thing which the book has done is that
Mm.
the underlying theme of how trade is influencing public health and universal healthcare,
Yeah,
and how healthcare is also influencing the trade of many products is the critical point, which is an underlying theme across all the chapters.
right. Mm.
And one thing, so it's very interesting, we were talking about the last one on nutrition.
Hmm.
And we in WHO have the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which was
Hmm.
negotiated around 2005. It came into force.
Right.
But it is not known that alcohol actually predates that in terms of trying to get an agreement.
Oh, okay.
And if
Okay.
you actually look at the reason why it is interesting to look at US law is because US law has influenced international law to a big degree. Even the
Hmm.
creation of the United Nations and the formation of the WHO.
Right.
We, of course, now have the present government going the other way in many ways, but
Yeah, yeah.
have been responsible for this international system. So
Hmm.
that is very important. And if you look at, I have drawn in this book the history.
Hmm.
Very fascinating how alcohol in the DRAM laws in the 1990s was
Hmm.
a matter of discussion.
Hmm.
And sometimes the cultural context is also very important. How, alcohol is a celebration. Even I remember in WHO in 2010, we were designing a poster for alcohol awareness that, harmful effects of alcohol. And
Hmm.
then somebody came up that, you're having the F1, the Formula races, and we are
Hmm.
celebrating with champagne. How can you say alcohol is bad? So
Right.
are the issues that, when we are messaging for public health, whether it is the
Hmm.
physician or whether it is the government or whether it is other stakeholders who are interested in public health, and the biggest person is the citizen.
Yes.
Can we advocate in a manner which is balanced and which is, looks at everyone in a way that we can move forward on some of these themes?
Mhm.
This was the intention of the book, and that is why I covered all the areas where, from time to time, I was called upon by the WHO programs to assist and advise. So, for
Okay.
example, in the chapter on traditional medicine,
Mhm.
as you know, currently in the Ministry of Ayush, it's a very important
Yes.
focus
Mm.
area. They are doing some tremendous work on research. But it is very important to know the source of those plant products.
Mhm.
And when we see that, while my basic focus was intellectual property and trade agreements, the Convention on Biodiversity became very important. And then the
Right.
plant treaty of the FAO became very important, the Food and Agriculture Organization,
Mhm.
because we have to know the origin of these plants and how they are going to eventually land into medicines. And also the rules of origin agreement of the WTO, which says that
Mhm.
where this agreement is coming from, where is the product coming from, how much product is.
Right.
So there is a large gamut of international agreements that, and subsequently, and as a result of that national interface, that
Mhm.
becomes very important. And that is what I thought is very critical, and which is why I covered all these areas in the universal healthcare aspect in the second book.
Okay.
And, in terms of access to medicines, Gauri, you'll be surprised. We talk about drugs.
Yes.
And our first point would be that all drugs should come under the Ministry of Health or maximum under the Ministry of Pharmaceuticals because they are the ones manufacturing it.
Correct.
But
Mm.
narcotic drugs are part of another UN framework convention, and they are controlled
Okay.
by the Ministry of Commerce.
Oh.
So what happens is that we have all these different agencies, and sometimes the role that one agency is adopting has an influence on national and international system, which we don't probably realize.
Realize.
And
Mm.
there is an interconnected and a play between them. So
Mhm.
another aspect in this book, which I tried to bring about, is this interconnectedness between various programs.
Mhm.
And there is a need to look at an interconnectedness when we approach these aspects in the national and also in the international system once we go for certain kinds of negotiations.
Wow. Okay. No, no, very interesting. It is really, really interesting. And to the point that you made, when you were speaking, I've actually got my hands on the book. I'm trying to start reading it. I've done, I think, probably a couple of chapters now.
Thank you. That's
Because
nice.
when we
It's a
because when we get the
compliment.
manuscript, no, when we get the manuscript, what generally we tend to do as a publisher is to scan through it. We don't read entirely, and even if somebody is, for example, copywriting, they look at it from a language perspective. So the content doesn't really get into you. This time I'm reading it as a book.
I have a hard time believing that, considering that Jayashree went up and down with me many times.
No, but again, as you mentioned, it is purely from a technical standpoint.
Yeah, that's
Is everything okay and all that? So this time I'm reading it as a book. So
thank you.
after hearing
That's
the
very proud.
no, I mean I meant it because after I heard you speak and I heard Dr. Vinod Paul speak, it really made a lot of sense in terms of the fact that I should read the book. So in
Thank you.
full.
Thank you.
So I know you made a mention of this, but for the purpose of the viewers who are going to see this channel, um, what I mean, apart from the standard, we will take the book to market, etc., etc. But this book is for who? Is it targeted at a particular segment? Is it for all? And if it is for all, then why is it for all?
Yeah, when I was writing this book, this is exactly which I had in mind.
Hmm.
And I would like to say that it is for all, because
Hmm.
now that you have said you're reading it as well. But I
Yeah.
do think that, I tried a lot of this when I interact with the WHO programs also. A lot of science gets spoken in a scientific language,
Hmm.
and
Yes.
sometimes it becomes very difficult to understand. I tried very hard in this book to to put it in a very easy to understand language so that it can be picked up by anybody who wants to read it.
Hmm.
But having said that, I think it is extremely helpful to all the policy persons. In fact, just
Makers.
yesterday, I got an email and a message from one of the persons in the Ministry of Pharmaceuticals that I just heard about this book and I'm reading it now. When can I come and discuss it with you with respect to some of the issues you have brought about in the medical devices chapter? And one of the things
Hmm.
he
Yeah.
said was, which was an eye opener for me. He says, we hear of a lot of things, but this is the first time it's all given in a very comprehensive and easy to read manner. And all the information is at the same place.
Same place. Yeah.
And another thing I think, which is the strength of this book, is that as you well see, we have I have put in all the footnotes where I have sourced the information from, and most of
Hmm.
it is in public domain.
Yeah. Right. Correct.
And I have weaved a story around that information to be able to make it readable.
Readable. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
this information, the advantage of all the footnotes is that, for example, if you look at the medical devices chapter and you want to know now what is the latest happening in terms of standard setting for the in vitro
Yeah.
the devices,
Hmm.
all you
Hmm.
have to do, there is already a work going on. And I have
Hmm.
the meeting which has taken place 2 years ago, you want to know what happened in the latest meeting. You just have to look at that link, press it, and you have that information.
You'll have that. True. Yeah.
So the advantage is that it's easy to reach out and to find out what more has happened based on what is given there. And the
Mhm.
context is something that I did try to bring about.
No.
And
Yeah.
and
No, no,
finally,
absolutely. Yeah.
there
Yeah.
are
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
there
Yeah.
are different. So we look at medical devices as something with the medical devices, but we don't realize that there is a World Customs Organization which is playing a through the movement
Yes.
and trade, the harmonized system of classification. So knitting
Correct.
them all together was very important.
No, very true. I mean, I think I will get back to you once I complete the book, and I'm sure I'll have some questions. So I'll come back on that. Um, Before I go to the last bit, so we were talking about a sequel to the book. So is that going to happen?
Well, I wouldn't like to say anything till it happens because it's a lot of work, and I before I put anything forward, I have Gauri, when I wrote this book, I was really wanting to do it. And
Hmm.
it was kind of, I was spending, as it is, I have this, we have the regular work also in WHO.
Yes. Yeah.
It's quite intense because from time, and also because it is, ever since COVID has happened, now we have to work across different time zones because everybody has got very comfortable with virtual meetings.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the demands on the time are very interesting because if we have a meeting with our PAHO office, which is based in Washington, then we have to be at a different time
Yeah.
zone. And then if it is Manila, which is way in, in the Wipro office, so there's a lot of work and a lot of time zone that has to be covered. And the way I got this going was really, I just set aside that I will at least put in at least 2 hours every day. And that's how iteratively, I was able to put it together. So to answer your question, I have to be able to do that again. And although Dr. Paul mentioned all those aspects in his
Yes.
opening speech, I still have to give it a thought. But I'll come back to you.
Sure. Absolutely. Now, just coming to the last bit, and this is what I mentioned to you earlier. What is your, I don't know if the word advice is right, but what is your advice to people who want to come into this field? It's a very niche field, right? So, if somebody is interested, what is the path they need to take? What happens? How does it happen? This is for youngsters, I mean, pretty much. So I leave it to you to interpret my question the way you wish to.
Uh, I would say two things. Firstly, I think youngsters are very interested in this field,
Hmm.
and a lot of people are taking it up. because of the range of the trade and intellectual property, I mentioned it earlier when I spoke, it's like
Yes.
salt and pepper, it's a bit about it in everything.
Yes.
And even when we look at software and digital health, not software as software for the software industry, we can even look at it in terms of the financial services and others. But if I look at the health field itself, the range is absolutely fascinating. So I think it's an area where there is a lot of work which is happening. And because, patents, in fact, I think if you have to read some of the best novels, one should open up the USPTO website, the United States Patent and Trademark Office website, to see what are the patents that are being taken out today.
Okay. Yeah. Got
Because
it.
it is absolutely fascinating when you see where technology is going.
Yeah.
So, given that, and especially with the AI and that becoming a part of so many whether it is drug discovery, whether it is into the trade aspects, whether it is, the other day I read something like Elton John in the UK mentioned that, we need to do something because if AI is going to replicate us, how are we going to be paid for our work? So these
Yes.
are
Very
all
true.
issues in the legal field and in the field of intellectual property and trade and technology. This interface of IPR, trade and technology is, I think, where the future is. So I do feel that it's a very promising area to venture into, not just in the area where health is covered, but across the whole spectrum.
Across. Yeah. The range is very, very, very vast. There is no doubt about it. That's true. So, I mean, there's a lot more to be said. I'll probably, if I do come across very specific clarifications, questions that I have as I read, I will come back to you and probably, we can record snippets and I can use that. So the intent is to actually put this together for the public. It is not just about the book; it's about the field itself. It's not just about the book. And I mean, given that I've said 30 minutes because that's generally the trend now, and I'm just leaving it at that. But again, thank you very much for taking the time. I know it's a working day. I know that I asked you just once and you said, it's okay. The timing is fine. So thank you very much for that.
God, thanks a lot. God bless you and have a
Thank
great
you.